Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you would mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that. I also love it if you leave a comment. So if you have a question about the video, you want some, leave some constructive criticism, suggestion for a video, or if you just want to tell me how you do things, that's always interesting to hear. So I like to hear those kinds of things. Lately I've been doing a lot of sort of modernish stuff, and so today I thought for a change I would do something a little bit more traditional. I picked out a pretty Lapis cabochon, and I think it'll make for a nice centerpiece in it. It's going to be a little bit more of a beginner project probably. Basically a bezel set stone with some decorations around it and a fancy band. And so I think it's well within the reach of a beginner who's had a little bit of experience. Before we get started, though, I wanted to make sure that I thank some people. First, my patrons are my core group of supporters, and I think they're just an awesome group of people. I really want to thank them for the nice community that they've created over there. It's a great place with a lot of really talented people, and I get to pick their brains, and they get to pick my brain, and we get to share pictures of what we're making. It's a nice place, so thank you for making it like that. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and I wanted to thank them specifically. We just passed 18,300, I believe, and that's awesome. The thing that I really like from the YouTubers is not only their subscription, but the fact that they tell me that they're getting something useful out of these, and sometimes that's really moving what they tell me, and I do appreciate that. It's nice to hear that you're doing some good somewhere. So I do also appreciate the Buy Me a Coffees and the Super Thanks. That helps with the cost of materials, so thanks for that as well. All right, well, let's get started on this project. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get on my merch store. I really like them to keep track of my projects and to have a place to sketch up what I'm planning to do. And oh, this one has on the back a useful chart that converts fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters, which I use pretty frequently. There's a couple of other designs on some of the other ones, but they're all available on my merch store, so check them out if you're interested. Okay, so this was the last one I did. This was Saturday's video, and it was more of kind of a brutalist, square kind of modern looking ring. This one is going to be a little more traditional, I think. So let me find that stone. I picked out a pretty Lapis cabochon. There. That's going to go like that. And my thought is, I've done variations similar to this over the years. I don't think I've done one exactly like this, but I was going to use some half-round wire that was originally 8 gauge, but I kind of rolled it out to be a little bit thinner. It's more close to 10 gauge. It's not exactly right, but it ended up being about 2.8 millimeters wide. And I'm going to use that to make these half circles here. Inside of each of these half circles, I'm going to put a ball, and I'm going to make a bigger silver ball for right here and right here. And for the bezel, I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, which is 26 gauge is the stuff I'm using today, and that's 4.76 by 0.41 millimeters. So that'll be soldered down onto a base here, which is going to be made out of 22 gauge sheet, and that is 0.66 millimeters thick. And so that's going to be mounted on top of a band that I'm going to make out of 16 gauge square wire, and I'm going to do some little curly cues in it and make it kind of a 4-strand band, I think. 4-strand band? 4-wire band? But that's 1.3 millimeters if I remember right. So I think to start with we'll make our bezel, and so let me find some of that 26 gauge bezel. I will likely cut it a little bit shorter too before we finish this off. I like to keep the tall stuff around that way. You can kind of file it down to whatever size you want. So, several people have asked me recently to do some southwestern kind of jewelry, and I will occasionally do something sort of southwestern-y, but that's not really my style. And So this one may be kind of the closest you'll see me make to something like that. I used to make more stuff like that, but if you're new to my channel, I use hard silver sheet solder for most of my solder joints. I use a liquid flux that I dribble on through a dropper bottle like this most of the time. I used to use a spray bottle most of the time, but this works a little bit better, I think, for most situations. My torch is a Smith acetylene air torch. It's the Silversmith model they have. It just draws in atmospheric air through the little holes on the side of the torch tip. So it doesn't have a second tank. It's not as hot as an oxyacetylene torch, but it's hotter than a propane torch. So it's kind of in a nice happy medium space of those, I think. The tip size I use is number 1 generally. Okay, so let's file the ends of these. I usually, and this is not the only way to do this, but if you're new to this, I usually, when I'm going to solder my bezel, I make it into kind of an angular shape. And that allows me to place a piece of solder on a nice flat surface generally, where I can get it to lay nicely. So when I go to solder this, I have these two ends pushing together relatively tightly. And then we'll make sure they're lined up nice, and we'll just solder that. Hard silver sheet solder melts at or flows at about 1450 degrees. It's 75% silver with some other metals mixed in to lower the melting temperature. Well, this cab is 22 by 15 millimeters, so it's a pretty good sized cabochon. So if you like little dainty rings, this probably isn't going to be a little dainty ring. We did okay on size there. Yeah, so when I make the mark, I usually cut it just a little bit beyond where they meet, so it has a little extra room for filing. So when I file it flat, it's just about right. Okay, so I think our next step is we want to make these decorations that go around the outside of this. And so the easiest way to do that is to take this piece of half-round wire, and we're going to wrap it around something cylindrical and just cut off like half circles. And that usually makes for a nice look. If I did it like around this thing. This is called a bail making pliers. That's probably plenty, so let's cut it off right there. And then I think in order to get the most consistency, maybe we should use the saw to do this. Sometimes I just snip them off, but let's saw them just for giggles. It's a little bit of a mess here, but I just scored a line down the top of this. I'm just going to cut right through that. So I got those cut in half, and initially I was going to cut through the second half with the saw, but that wasn't working very well. And so what I did was, since these were cut off in kind of a spiral shape, I'll realign those a little bit. And I'm sure there's an easier and better way to do this, but then I ended up cutting off a half a circle. A little bit more than half a circle. You could use your miter vise jig for this if you want to. You get kind of a half circle then. So that's what I ended up with. Keep that one as a spare maybe. Some of these might be usable, although they're probably a little short because I cut them a little bit long on either side. So I'll put them in there in case we need them. This also tells us how big a piece of sheet we need now. So we need a piece that's about that big, by that big, by that big, about that big. I want it to be big enough to contain all of these decorative components that I'm putting on here. So, and then after I cut the piece of sheet, I think we can probably solder the bezel down and solder these components on, and then we'll make some balls, and little tiny ones in each of these half circles, and then a little bit bigger ones for the central point on either side. Then we can start working on the band. So let's find the 22. I was going to use 22 gauge for this. A lot of times I'll use 26, but I think I'm going to use a little bit thicker for this one. So we can really just kind of do this if you want. We'll mark there. Whenever I've taught in-person classes, I always tell people to cut off the, the corners. Inevitably, there's somebody in the class who decides that the best place is to cut a piece of sheet out right like there. So I never did quite understand that, but this is going to be kind of a beast of a ring, but I think it'll be pretty. Need something pretty today. It's pretty gloomy where I'm at today. It's all gray and overcast. Perhaps I should have used a warmer color stone, but I haven't made anything with lapis for a while, so I thought that might be kind of nice. So we'll start with this, and then we'll move on to this other stuff. The thing about soldering on a thicker sheet like this onto a bezel is the more mass you have underneath there compared to the mass of the bezel itself, it's going to take longer to get that bigger mass up to the soldering temperature for the solder to really stick to it. And while this thing on top is kind of exposed to the heat a little bit too much, the direct flame. And so it's easy for beginners to melt their bezels before they get the sheet up to temperature. So you got to really kind of actively avoid the bezel itself up top here with the flame and kind of focus on the other surface areas and keep it, moving around constantly. It's easy to get distracted and focus the heat for too long in one spot, especially when you're new. So let's cut a few more of these. Get that flux all heated till it kind of settles down. We can place our solder on the inside. Using pretty big pieces. You want to make sure that that solder seam wicks all the way along the bottom. Nobody wants any embarrassing gaps in their bezel seam. What would people say? I think in order to get things as symmetrical as possible, try and get those right at the ends and maybe start with 2 of them and then just work our way around. And I'm going to do something called pick soldering, where I pick up a little bit of solder on the end of the pick, and when I think it's about the right temperature, I'll put it where I want it to go. And you don't have to do that for this step. You can lean little pieces of solder if you want. It's just kind of the way I do things, and I'm kind of used to it. So it is a useful skill if you're interested in learning how to do it. I have a video. I'll put a link up there for you. So every time I flux these, it's going to boil. Sometimes may move things around, so I may need to reposition them. Let's make a couple of little balls. See if we can get a good size for the center of that piece there. Let's find some scrap. A little bit of scrap silver. Solder those on, and then we'll make some little balls to see how they look in those other parts. If I'm going to make a whole bunch of balls of the same size, usually I take a piece of scrap wire and cut equal lengths. And I think for these ones, let's see if we can make them about see how big those come out to be about that size. So if I can get them to do that, I think that would be alright. Let me make a bunch of these and I'll be right back. I don't know if you can see or not, but I have a little ball on top of each of these, so it's kind of sitting on top of the edge. This one sank down in there because it's a little bit bigger, so I'm going to have to make a slightly bigger ball for that one, I think. Or set one on top of it or something if it accidentally solders in there. So I'm just going to, I cut some smaller pieces of solder. Okay, I'm going to cool that off and take a peek at it, and then we'll see what I'm going to do about those end ones and make sure all of these balls are attached to it. There's nothing more embarrassing than selling a piece of jewelry and having your balls fall off. So the one that was down in there actually came out. Well, I think I'm just going to run with it then, I guess, if it's going to stay in there. So I'm going to put a little bit of solder in there, try and center this one a little bit better. My next step is going to be to trim off the excess here on the outside, and then I'll probably use a ball burr and kind of clean it up in between those spots to make it easier. Should have said I'm going to start by trimming off a sheet like this. Then I can use my file and I'll start getting in those little nooks and crannies, and then I'll use that ball burr to clean it up nice. Okay, so you can see we got kind of this design going on there. Needs to be pickled pretty badly. But we need to make the band now, and basically we're going to be doing this kind of thing 4 times. So I did an experimental one, and to get it about the size that I wanted it to be, which was about a 9. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bend these the same way, and then we'll solder them together. Let's do this with this smallest one on the round nose. Or not the round nose, the bail making pliers I have here. Just kind of keep that from twisting too much. Somebody in the comments the other day said something to the effect that you're so wholesome. Which cracked me up. So much for that bad boy image I was trying to foster. Never made a ring exactly like this particular one, but I've made similar ones. I don't think I've ever made this sort of a band. Let's see how it turns out. I think it should be alright. Probably close enough. Let's see if we can kind of find the center of those. Right about there. So let's do this. Let's take this and bend it slightly in the middle. Like that. Then let's do these ones with a slightly steeper bend, I think. Yeah, because we're going to want it kind of like that. I think that's pretty good. Let's solder all those together. If you haven't checked out my 2024 ebook tutorial guide, you might want to do that. I'll put a link up here for you. It's a great resource. It's got links to all of the videos I did in 2024, including a picture of a sketch I made, final outcome, a list of materials you need to make it, difficulty rating, and some notes I made about whether I thought it was a good project, whether I liked it or didn't, what I would change if I was to do it again. Stuff like that. Problems I ran into that you might be able to avoid by having me already run into them. It's a great way to support my channel too. Might have to use that to inspire a pendant or something at some point. Let's start to shape it into a ring shape. I'm going to do it up near the top of the ring mandrel here and just kind of bend it towards me. I find it's good if you flip it over periodically because of the taper on the mandrel. And so I'm going to spend a little time getting everything lined up, and then I'm going to file the top a little bit flat. Let's do a little filing across the top here. So I've really got 8 points of contact here, so I'm trying to make sure they're all touching. Okay, I'm going to change plans a little bit. I'm going to use some easy solder, some paste solder on this, simply because my torch is running out of gas and I don't feel like changing the tank right now. Well, I think we might have gotten them all, actually, so and it's relatively straight. So I think let's let that clean up in the pickle for a while and we'll polish it up. Okay, I think that'll be nice. This is kind of what I had in mind here. And I haven't yet set the stone. I did put a little bit of tag board underneath there to raise it to the correct level. And I do this a little differently than some people. I use the flat side of my chain nose pliers to be my bezel pusher. We're just going to push that top of that bezel right up against there. Once I have that pretty tight against there, I'm going to use the rounded part to do some burnishing, which is where you rub that top edge where the two come together. Kind of flatten it out and really neaten things up. Alright, well, I'll do a little bit of final cleanup with a fine blue silicone polishing wheel at the top of these, top of this bezel, and then I'll get some pictures at the end. Okay, well, that was a more traditional kind of, maybe even a little bit southwestern-y sort of lapis ring. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you go. And I'd love it if you'd take a moment and visit my main channel page on YouTube. I have 444 or 445 videos, I think now. It's a lot over there. I've been doing these 3 per week for about 3 years now, so there's a ton of content. I'm almost positive you'll find something else that you like over there if you check it out. So peruse my channel. Make sure to subscribe to it, and don't forget to check out the video description down below this one. There's some important links. If you want to get one of those nice design idea books I showed you at the beginning, those are available there. There's a link to my new e-book, which is a guide to last year's video tutorials, of which there were over 170. It's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a great way to support my channel. Finally, there's a link to my Patreon if you want to check out that community over there. It's a great place with a lot of really nice people. So, all right, well, thank you for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.